So what's an alternative? Like, we're going to do it this way. I'm going to click on an edit button, have this turn into a form. What's another way we could handle deletes? Or updates, sorry.
I used a dialogue.
Like a dialog box that pops up? Did you have one individually for each to do, for each ugly thing? Yeah. Another thing I've seen is just like, so you put an input up here at the top that says input the ID of the thing you want to update, so the form's always on the DOM, but you don't really see that on actual websites. Usually it's per item, right? If you're updating an Instagram post, there's not just one form for all the posts. Each post you go into have their own private form that allow you to update that individual item. So that's what we're shooting for here. And that's just going to require ugly thing to be a little bit smarter of a component. What do I mean by smarter? A class. It can think for itself. And there's a few reasons why. We're going to build it wrong first. It's the first part of it to prove my point, and then we're going to fix it. But what we need to start off with is a toggle. The toggle is the edit button. When I click the edit button, it needs to toggle a form. And when I maybe unclick the edit button, it toggles it off. So something that will change this to a form and then back to the display. That's the functionality I'm going to build first. And I'm going to start off by building it in the app.js to show you an inherent issue that you may not see ahead of time. So what functionality do you need to create a toggle? There's two pieces to it.
A piece of state is true or false.
Okay, so we have a toggle or a Boolean in state. Is editing is false. All right, what's the second piece of a toggle?
Switch.
Explain what you mean.
Somewhere where you return like the opposite.
Yeah, so we need a class method that toggles this back and forth.
I guess switch has a different meaning.
Yeah, it's like, do you mean this? Do you mean this? Yeah. Cool, so we're gonna call edit toggler as our method. And it's gonna just set state to take previous state and say whatever is editing, whatever its current status is, turn it into the opposite. I'm in my app right now. I am going to change this though, just to show you the issue. Okay, what component needs this functionality? The ugly thing. This needs to be able to toggle itself. Okay, so I'm going to start passing both of these down every step of the way to get it there. So is editing is the Boolean. And again, I will be changing this. So if you're following along, I wouldn't type this in because you're going to have to end up erasing it and moving it. And then edit toggler is the method. Okay. So that's getting passed. And then we go to ugly things list. It's going to receive both of those as props. And we're going to send them a step further to this ugly thing. So is editing, props.is editing. This is the Boolean from the state up above, and then edit toggler, this, or props.edit toggler. Is that what I called it? Yes. All right, so these have been passed down to ugly things list. Ugly things list is passing down a reference of both of these to every ugly thing. And let's just introduce a quick dynamic render. So I'm going to open this up so I can do a ternary statement inside of my return statement. So I'm going to have an open bracket here, closing bracket here. And I'm going to check if I am not in props.is editing. So if this is not true, then I'm not editing and show me the regular display. Else, let's just show a div that says I'm editing. Right, well, we're breaking a rule right now. We can't return adjacent JSX elements without a wrapper. So what should I wrap this in? Fragment. Have we talked about fragments?
No.
Okay, so I could do a div. The div would work just fine, wrapping a div around this. However, for styling purposes, that's a headache, because now I have this div wrapping another div, where really this div should be able to style this and this, be the container for both. So fragments in React look like this. They're kind of cool. And what they are just imaginary divs. They let us get past the adjacent JSX rule, but when this gets put into the browser, this is stripped out and this div becomes the parent of these elements. So it's a nice, quick, intermediary element that just makes React happy with, returning multiple elements. But at the end all, this is the div, this won't even exist.
And we can't use that in place of like the action div outside div.
You could, if you made this a fragment,
Yeah.
then this ugly thing wouldn't have its own container. This div would be the container for every single ugly thing. We don't want that. We want each one of these, as we see with the blue border, to have their own div.
You could do it on app.js.
Yeah, and then we wouldn't be able to style the div that's containing our whole application. So fragments are only for if there's a reason. Usually it's for a dynamic render. Show one thing versus the other, but make sure regardless of what I'm showing, this or this, that this div is the parent element for both of these segments. Okay, so this is a dynamic render. I'm saying if this is false, show this. If this is true, show this. So I just now need to make a button to toggle it. So I'm going to say, here's my button for edit. And on click, I'm going to call props.edit toggler. All right. What is going to happen when I click this edit button?
It's gonna say I'm editing. Nothing.
Everything's going to disappear.
Okay, what will be affected? If I click this edit, will this be affected? If I click this, will this be affected? Will both? Will neither?
All of them will be.
Yeah, so I want to edit this one. I click, and nothing happened.
I think your function will be. And that app,
What is it?
I think it just returns itself. I think we can do that.
Oh, let's negate. I'm saying if it was true, keep it true. Keep it true. Yeah, change is editing to the opposite of what it was. Okay, so I click edit and both of them toggle. That's not the effect I want, right? I want the one I click on to toggle, the other ones to stay alone. Why is it that they are both toggling when I'm only clicking on one?
You don't have a nice- No idea.
No. How many of these booleans exist? Is editing.
Just one.
If I have 10 ugly thing items, how many of these booleans exist?
Got it all up there on the state.
I have this in app.js. There is only one instance of this boolean and this method. So when this boolean changes from true to false, this reference is being passed down to every single ugly thing. They're all tied to the exact same piece of state. So toggling one affects all the others because they're all tied to the same piece of information. So this is the point. This is why I'd say ugly thing needs to be its own class. It needs to be able to think for itself. It needs its own toggle method. And its own ability that when I say toggle this ugly thing, don't toggle this one as well, right? This is tied to the same piece of state as this one. So doing one automatically affects the other. So that is why I'm like, okay, maybe I tried it here first and I realized, you know what, it's not going to work in an app or else they're all going to toggle. Where does this method and this state need to go? And ugly thing, yeah. So let's make that fix. We're going to turn this into a class. Hey. Does that make sense though before I jump into this, I guess?
So you're going to transfer that component.
Yeah, the functionality of the toggle I'm moving down into here so it can do it on its own without affecting other instances of this component. So whenever you're switching to a class, I always start off this simple. Change the declaration to a class, then write your render method, and put the brackets right before the closing bracket. That is the easiest and quickest way to switch something to a class. We're done. This is a class.
Function,
Yep, I replace the declaration and then I just wrap everything I have currently in a render and I'm good. But of course there's errors now. Why is it saying props is not defined? Because of,
Give you
see this stuff.
Yeah, now we're in a class, so it's this dot everything. So we're gonna click on all of these.
Yeah, props on B on the line 12 too.
Oh yeah.
It'd be easier just to assign this dot props to props.
I think that might confuse React.
Be confusing, but
Cool. Okay, and now we can start implementing the feature we need. So I'm going to pull in a constructor, super, and this dot state. And what again am I taking from this component and moving down? All right. Is editing. I'll put it in state. And edit toggler. I'll make it one of these class methods. Okay, so now it's not this dot props dot is editing. It's this dot what? State. Yes, it's local now. It's not coming from props. It's coming from its own class. And then this dot props dot edit toggler is now what?
State.
Is edit toggler in state?
Oh, no.
So how do we refer to a class method?
So state.
Is edit toggler in state?
No. So it's just this.
Yeah, just this. So I know I'm kind of drilling you, but it's all out of love. Okay, let's see if it works now. So I'm going to edit one. Okay, it's thinking for itself. Other ones were not affected. Now, does this have its own state too? Yeah. So I can control them separately now because every single ugly thing that's getting mapped out in this list, I don't need this anymore. It's no longer coming down. And I don't need this anymore. It's no longer coming down. Every single ugly thing that's getting mapped out is a stateful component. So now we have two of these. So we have two versions of the state versus the one version we had in app that both were using. And that fixes that issue. They can now think for themselves. Well, this is bad, right? I can edit, but I can't get out of editing. So where would I put that in this component so I can get out of my editing stage?
Another button where you put your div on editing.
Yeah, down here. So I'm actually going to use a fragment down here as well and just put a button in it for now. It'll just be close and on click. What are we calling on click?
Edit toggle.
Yeah, we're going to toggle it back to not being editing anymore. Okay, so now I can toggle this open and close independently from one another.
I have a question. On this page, where are you getting props?
Where am I getting props?
Yeah.
Class components inherently receive props. We don't have to tell it to receive it. It automatically receives them. And we just refer to them as this dot props. It's only functional components where you have to say expected.
It's coming from the components when we're extending it.
The constructor sets it up. Yeah, the component teaches the constructor how to set it up when we call super, because the component class in React has this in its constructor. It's expecting props, and it says this dot props equals props. It's doing that for us in the background, so we can just say this dot props, and it's referring to any props passed down.
Why don't we just do class for everything? Wouldn't that make it life just easier to change stuff?
We don't want as many states as we could make everything stateful, but there's no need to, and it makes it the fewer stateful components you can have, the simpler it is to manage. We're thinking like single source of truth, put everything in one spot if possible, but this we had to make our own state for because this has to work independently from other things exactly like it. Yeah, good question though. You have a question? No, okay. All right, so that's the first step of the put request if we're doing it this way, making sure that these can work independently. The next step, what should happen when I click edit? Instead of just seeing a close button, what should we be seeing? A form, yeah. A form with inputs that allow us to give it a new title, description, and or image URL. Well, do I need to go build a form?
No.
Ah, what are you saying? think you're saying something good.
Right, copy your last.
Yes. Is there any difference between this form for adding a to-do or adding an ugly thing and a form for editing an ugly thing? What's the difference between those two forms? There's one major difference.
ID and handle submit.
Yeah, what the handle submit does. When this form is used with the handle submit we gave it currently, it adds a to-do to the database. We can use this exact same form template again, as long as we pass down a different handle submit, it'll work just fine. It works the same way. We're just passing a different functionality, but we have the same inputs when we add an ugly thing as we would with editing. So let's not make a new form. Let's just reuse our ugly thing form. Use React the way it should be. So an ugly thing, I'm going to import ugly thing form. And every single form, or every time we edit, it's going to render this. Now it might probably break. Oh, it won't break until we type in it. But now notice a form shows up when I toggle. And they both have their own. That's cool. Well, what does ugly thing form need? Style, sure. You got no class.
It needs to stick flat on that
Well, the nice thing is we can look at app.js and see what did it need.
Props from state after this.
Yeah, it needs this, but the same issue with the toggle. Do we want all of the ugly things to share the same inputs, or do we want them to be able to manage their own inputs individually? Right, when I put the toggle up here and had one ugly thing toggle, they all toggle. So if I kept the inputs up here and was editing one, what's going to be happening to this form when I'm typing in this form if they're tied to the same state?
It's gonna be happening.
Yeah, when I'm typing a title here, this will also be filling out. So we don't want that. So where can we put these inputs in the methods so that these can function individually? Yep, we're staying an ugly thing.
You said if you typed in the input box, that was gonna break it.
Yeah, because there's right now I'm not passing any handle change or anything to it, so they're all undefined. As soon as I trigger one like this, oh, that was amazing, nothing broke. Oh, that's that's the one that works. There we go. Oh, what about submit? That's refreshing. That's cool. It's not breaking. It should be, because none of these are defined right now when we're using it here. All right, so we can now look at our ugly thing form and we know what we need to build next. Everything we built for the form for the post request, we need to redo for the put request in its own separate place, because of how we're doing this. Now, if they only had to view one of these at a time, only had the ability to do one at a time, it might be safe to put this in the app because you can only handle one at a time. But the fact that I can have two of these being edited at once, they need their own state. So in ugly thing, let's start introducing that. What are the three inputs each ugly thing is going to have to maintain? Cool. All right, and what are the two methods that this form needs to work?
Submit and change.
Handle change, handle submit. We'll grab the name and the value from the event.target, update the appropriate piece of state on handle change. And then handle submit, we'll just write it up to the event.prevent default for now. So now we have the 5 things we need, the 3 inputs and the 2 methods to pass down to the form. So let's tie all that together. Okay. Now everything is being passed down to the ugly thing form. Let's console.log this.state and try typing in one of these forms. So notice ugly thing console log twice. This happened twice. Why did this console log twice?
That's what it is.
Yes.
Because it loads the page first, and then it renders the page.
Well, how many ugly things do we have? Two. So this component was created twice when this was mapping it out. So this happened twice, one for this one for this one. So we're seeing both of these ugly things here. So if we look at state here, it has its own form and toggle. This one has its own form and toggle. If I were to click edit on one of these, this one is the same as this first one now. This one is now true. This one is still false. It's not editing. Let's type a little bit into it and see if we can see those inputs all working. So here's the most recent one. Yep, that one's keeping track of it. But if the state for this one is still unaffected. Cool. So that was a little bit. Have I lost anybody up to this point? This is pretty complex.
Yeah, I'm sure I got this and these and this.
Can I see the edit toggle again?
Yeah. Right, everything that we've done so far has been in here. We have added nothing to the app.js or the ugly things list. It's just this component we turn into a class so that it can show either its information or a form to update that information.
Why get to need the
Okay, so
Because I didn't want to use divs. I
so
don't want extra divs.
in order to send like the information that we change, we wouldn't pass that to the app.js as a prop. We would do our put and send it to the database and have the database do it. Is that
So
how
that's
it's
the
done?
last step. The last step is now writing the method that does the put request, and that will be in app.js. We'll talk about why. But everything else, the functionality to get to that point is all built independently into the ugly thing so they can all do it independently. But the functionality, when I click submit on any of these edit forms, it needs to have the same functionality. So I shouldn't have to write that method a bunch of times. It's fine if it does the same thing as long as this can call it independently and this can call it independently, we're fine. But the reason the toggle had to be here is because it's dependent on state. And if they don't have their own private state, they all toggle at the same time, or their form all fills out at the same time. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's test the handle submit. We're going to console log this.state and test that first to make sure I can submit these inputs. So stuff, submit. Great. What would be better is if I click edit and these inputs already had the values that are existing, so you only had to remove the ones that you want to change. So how do we do that? Well, right now they're empty because we're starting their state off as empty. What if we could start their state off as what their current values display, like ugly thing 1 and this? So how do we set these, give these an initial value?
Would it just be this dot state dot value or title dot value?
Well, we're getting all this data via props, like props.title, props.description. So if we can set state off of that data, we'll be good. So we could try it here. Why isn't this knowing what title or props is? This comes down to how React works. When the React component first loads, constructor is the first thing that's called, and props only exists once constructor is done. So we have no reference to this dot props until constructor is done doing what it needs. So this is one of those cases where you actually say receive props and set state off of props. This is one way to do it. So now when I open up a form, they have their existing data in there. As the user, I just get to delete the one I want to change and update it. So not necessary, but it's a nice user effect. Have the inputs pre-filled off of props. You could also use component did now to do this. Just set state to these values. Component did mount. And the page is ready to load, or once the page is loaded, this dot set state to title to this dot props dot title.
That would be a better way of doing it, wouldn't it?
I think that's a problem with this framework.
Kind of forcing an extra reload.
Yeah, I'm forcing an extra reload where if I just pass it through here, it's not having to set state and call render again. So that's if I had a component did mount that was already setting state for some reason, then yeah, I just do it here. It's already happening anyways, but if not, let's just keep it here.
So with the sending us props, you just have to say props and the constructor and super.
Yeah, and that's just so I have a reference to the variable, so I can use it before this dot props is set up. Okay, we're getting close. Now when we submit, we're seeing this dot state, we're seeing it filled in. But what does handle submit need to do? This needs to do our put request. So what are the steps of a put request? When this handle submit happens, what is the first thing we're going to need to do? And it's not Axios. Okay, so we have the ID, right? How do we have access to this ugly thing's ID? Yeah, this dot props dot underscore ID, just like the one we're using for the delete. We have it. So I'm going to pull it out just so we can name it its own thing. I'll say ID equals this dot props dot ID. So we have the name. And I think Eric was using the non-underscore, so I'll stick with that. Okay, so we have the ID, pull from props. What else do we need for a put request?
The URL.
Before the Axios.
Oh.
There's
What
one
the
more.
change is gonna be on it.
Yeah, we need it's like a post request. We need to get the object ready to send to the database and say, this is what we're updating with.
So you're making a new object.
So I'm going to say updates equals a new object with a title, description, and image URL. And where am I getting the values for these?
This dot set state name.
This dot state. Every one of these components is managing their own input state. And it's either going to be what they already gave us, or it's going to be whatever they overwrote. So we're just going to send the whole object. This dot state dot title, this dot state dot description, and image URL.
Just the current state.
Yeah, because we're assuming at this moment in time when they click this submit button, we're assuming that they've changed one of these. They maybe updated this to be something new. So now we're sending these three inputs to the database to update the object with. And if the values haven't changed, that's fine. They'll still get updated in the database, but it won't make any difference. And if they have changed, then we'll see that change affected immediately when the put request comes back. All right, so now we have the two pieces of data we need for our put request. So now what do we do? Axios. Now we do Axios. Okay, so if I did, let's conceptualize this for a second. If I did the Axios dot put here, I'll grab the URL real quick.
Don't forget to do slash.
Here's the URL, and I'm going to add the ID to the end of it that we have. So go put request to this ID and send this object to update it with. It's going to come back with a response, and this response is the updated object. We're going to console log res dot data. Thank you. We're gonna have to move this in a minute. So let's see. All right, so I have this item. I'm going to edit it and make ugly thing 1 be something else. And we're console logging what's coming back from the server when this request comes back. So I'll click submit. And here's the response data. Title is something else, but everything else has stayed the same. There's an issue though. When I close this, has React updated? The database is updated. Why hasn't React updated?
Because you already did a component did know, so it hasn't received new data from the database.
Yeah, so how do we tell React to update without going and fetching new data?
Changing state.
Setting state. Yes, we need to set state and tell React something's changed. By updating state, React will do the rest. We'll make it show up. Well, this is the issue. Res.data is the new to-do, or the new ugly thing. Where am I maintaining the ugly thing state? Way up here. How do I get this updated into this? Yeah, so this is where, just like handle delete, we're going to do the Axios request way up here. We're just going to send the request the data it needs when it gets sent out from down below, ugly thing. So I'm going to move this up to app. And we're going to make a handle edit. And what are the 2 arguments this function is going to need? ID and updates. Okay, now it's going to work fine. As long as we hand this function all the way down to our ugly thing and call it with these data, just like the handle delete. Okay. Pause for dramatic effect. Any questions? All right, well, let's get this down to the thing. So handle edit needs to be passed down to which component down here? Okay, so yeah, those are the methods from earlier that we ended up moving down. So they're not even existing anymore. Handle edit, this dot handle edit. Okay, so ugly things list is receiving that function now as a prop. Just like handle delete, every ugly thing needs access to handle and edit. So we're going to hand that down as well. And now every ugly thing is receiving a this.props.handleEdit that I can call here in the handle submit. Right, this is just replacing the Axios request that was hard-coded here because we moved it up 2 levels. So when we moved it up, we had to pass the reference to the function down so we could still use it. That's all we did. Now the 2 arguments it's expecting, ID and then updates. So in ugly thing, we're going to pass it ID and updates. So that will be sent up to app, received, request will go out, and we should still see an updated object in the console here. So let's see if that works. We'll say woohoo, submit. All right, here's the new thing. It has the new title, nothing else changed, but again, we haven't updated yet. If I refresh, when it goes and gets the data, we can see that it has been updated, but we want React to update when it happens. So the last step of this. Now we have the data in the same component that's managing the state that data needs to be swapped into. So it's time to do some logic here. And this is going to be much like the delete. What did you have to do with the delete to update state? It's a little bit trickier. Before you updated the ugly things, you had to go through previous ugly things, find the thing that has the ID not equal to the one that's equal to the one that you just tried to delete. It said, hey, if the IDs don't match, keep that ugly thing. As soon as this registers true, strip it out. Don't return it. Well, handle edit, is that removing something from the array? Yeah, editing, if I have an array of 3 items, I should still have an array of 3 items. It's just the one of those 3 that was updated needs to be swapped. The old one needs to be pulled out and the new one needs to be put in its place. So what's a higher order array method you can use that gives you back the same size of an array, but allows you to change it? Map. Yeah, map lets you loop through an array, alter the data, and return a new array, but it's always the same size. So we need to map over prev_state.ugly things and just do a little bit of magic, but it's not that bad. And then eventually we'll return the new ugly things to be an array, but the new one. So we're going to hold off on that for now. Let's put little strings here, because we need to create this new array. So we're going to say const updated ugly things is prev_state.uglythings.map. And for each thing, let's do the following. Okay, so we're looping through it and we're checking. Does this thing get updated? Did this thing get updated? Does this thing get updated? So what would my if question be? To see, have we found a thing that's been updated? What data do we have that lets us know? So we're looping over the things. We're trying to find the one that was updated. Because right now we're looping over the outdated array.
If thing doesn't equal.
If thing, what property of thing is going to help us identify whether it's the one or not? Right, we are sending the ID to this function of the one that we're updating. So now that we're trying to update the state, we're going to see, hey, does this thing's ID equal the one that we just updated? So if this registers as true, that means we found the out of date thing. Yeah, so instead of returning the current thing to be added to the new updated things array, what would I return instead? Res.data is the updated object. But if the IDs don't match, that means that one was not updated. Just return it. This thing was not updated, so keep it in the array. But if this thing was updated, then return the updated version. Don't return the outdated one. And this is nice. It's going to go through the array. When it finds the one that's out of date, it's going to pull it out and put the new one in its place. So no order change.
What happens if you don't put a return thing?
Higher order methods need you to say return, or else they'll return undefined, especially map. So I'd have one thing in my array and then a bunch of undefines. So I need to tell it to return something either way. Okay, so that made our updated ugly things array, and then we can say update ugly things to be the updated ugly things. So let's see if this works and talk about it. So Yahoo this time, submit, I'll close, and reacted. Reacted. Now this is a lot of extra syntax because I'm not slimming it down. Let me change it really quick to see if it's easier for you to read or whether we want to keep it as this. So this could be said the same. This could be said the same way. Sorry, too many parentheses here. Okay, so that's the same update, just with ES6 slimmed down syntax.
That was fun, right?
What's that?
That was fun, right?
Not the first 10 times, no. So yeah, we're saying set state, go over prev state, update ugly things to be whatever this statement evaluates to. What this statement is doing is saying, loop over prev state.ugly things and look at each thing. If the ID of the current thing you're looking at equals the ID of the one we just updated, then return the response data in its place. Otherwise, just return the current thing because it's not updated. So it's doing the same thing. Is this syntax easier to read than the other one?
Yeah.
Just to remind us,
Keep it that way.
remind us where we came from real quick. Okay, it's that.
I personally like that one, but you gotta get better at the other ones.
No,
You're-
I like the second one much better.
It's a lot less writing. Okay.
If you put the big one, then you just put the other one as a comment.
No, I
Oh,
mean, he's recording it, so it's fine.
oh yeah, we're cool. And I'm so indecisive right now. Okay. All right, one last user effect. What did I break?
And what happened to update those?
So instead of,
You didn't have to do it, you didn't have to include it.
I didn't have to put it in its own variable because I'm doing it right in line here. This is going to evaluate the updated ugly things because this map returns a new array. So this will end up returning a new array and then update state. Where did I, unexpected token? Oh, I'm missing a bracket somewhere here. Yeah, I'm missing. Huh. Somebody.
This is when you just start putting in random
Can you go
brackets.
with the pink, addressing?
Let's follow the brackets. I love this game. Yellow to blue to purple to yellow. So we now need a blue parenthesis for the opening of the dot then. And then we need a bracket for the opening of the function. All right, we're good. It's a fun game. One more thing though, when I edit and I change something to something else, when I click this submit button, what I'd like to have happen is for this to automatically toggle back. Oh, that's fun.
I think you put your captions I do that.
I sure did. This is gonna you here.
We don't need to catch.
What's the catch? Shut up, Nate. So where would I go if I want this to automatically toggle? Not spelled right, but that's okay. When I click submit, I want this to automatically toggle. I don't want to have to click close to see it. Where am I going to go to implement that?
Your ugly thing.
Okay, ugly thing's in charge of its own, right, its own state. So where am I going to call, what am I going to call and where to get this to toggle back? What about right after we send the edit request, we call its own edit toggler function to make it toggle itself back closed. So now we'll see if this works. Doesn't spell right, but hey, cool. Now it toggles back and updates the data. That's actually going to bother me.
Then you have an edit function.
So what did we
Right.
just do?
What did we just do?
Yeah.
We said once we've sent off the request to get edited, close the edit form. Call edit toggler and toggle it back to show the display.
When you hit submit.
Yep. So hit submit. The first thing we do when we hit submit, we grab the ID, we grab the updates, and we send the request to go get updated. While that's happening, we then call edit toggler to toggle the form off because the updates have been sent. They don't need to see the form anymore. So that's making it so I can just,
You don't have to hit submit and then close.
right. I can hit close if I'm like, actually, I don't want to edit. But if I want to submit, I don't have to click close. It does it for me.
And if you really want to get fancy, you can do like an alert for the close saying, hey, are you sure your data will be lost?
Are you really, really sure?
You're really sure you want to submit this?
If you really want to be fancy, you can do it.
At this point in the app, where I would go next is styling. This is my MVP. I have all the functionality I want. Now I can style it. I'd wait up till this point. Because how fun is it to sift through class names and style sheets and all that when you're still working on logic? Let's get the functionality working, and then we can focus on, cool, I have all these parts. If I need to move them around for any reason, they'll still work fine. I can just start styling.
Cool.
Who likes this effect where I click edit and it squishes down? Yeah, that's what I imagine. No one should like that. That's kind of jittery for the user. So how could I fix that? Just one little styling trick.
Have the size of the div, set size.
Yes, and this is one of the advantages of using fragments. This div is the container for this display and this display. So if this has a fixed height, it won't jitter around. So I'll say have a height of 300, maybe. See if that works. Yeah, now when I click edit, the box is the same and I can style that separately.
And you can rename your ugly form and that one a class and completely screw with it without screwing the other one up, right?
The ugly thing form,
Yeah, like you give it a class name or, oh crap. never mind.
I could. I mean, if you want dynamic class names, like I want this form to be styled differently, I could tell the form to, instead of having a style, expect a class name from props. And now whenever I use this form, I just need to give my ugly thing form a class name prop equal to the class name I want it to have. Now this component is even more dynamic, even with styling. Like you can give it its own class name as a prop. And it will receive it and apply it to the class name. Yeah. Yeah. This is a lot. Unfortunately, your React API project will not need this kind of complexity. This is more so that if you're moving forward, working on things, we have a working example of something like this, but it's a lot. And your personal full stack applications may have something like this. But the project we're assigning now, you're just doing GET requests. So working with logic and making a website out of it, making it fully responsive, using React Router to have 3 pages, that's enough complexity, for sure.
You said no context, right?
You don't need to use context. Now, if you want to use context, go for it. Practice is great, but it will make it more complex. So if it's not making as much sense, it's going to make it harder. Maybe build all your state in the app.js, and then we can always refactor. You can refactor later. You can move stuff to context as needed. Yeah. Okay.